Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name's Tim Baghurst, and today's guest is Dr. Chris Hobbs. Chris, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a minute, but I want to say thanks for joining me again because we had this interview about a year, 18 months ago, and I was reviewing the transcript a couple weeks ago with a graduate student, and one of the comments was, "Wow, there's some gold in this." Well, if there's gold in it, maybe we'll get some gold again. So why not interview Chris again? So Chris, thanks again for joining us. If you wouldn't mind, just share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Quick connection here. My friendship with Dr. Baghurst here is really a COVID friendship.
Mhm.
We got forced to reconsider how we were connecting and learning and growing, all of us as professionals. And Tim at the same time was trying to launch brand new programming at FSU during that very complicated time. And so as a result, social media, Tim and I connected, and we really had like passions when it came to particularly coach education. And so I am now 21 years in education. 15 of those years were spent as an athletic administrator at a couple different private schools up and down the East Coast. I became friends with Tim while I was the director of athletics at the Kings Academy, West Palm Beach, Florida. I had a wonderful 5 years there. And then a little bit unexpectedly, had just a really unique opportunity presented to me. So technically, I am now the director of institutional advancement at Second Baptist School in Houston, Texas. And that's a mouthful as well. But in my background would be a lot of coaching experiences, a lot of athletic director experiences, have a master's degree in sport coaching, and then wrote my dissertation on the leadership behavior of athletic directors and how it correlates to the efficacy of their varsity head coaches. And so pretty passionate about that, pretty passionate about the impact that coaches can have on the lives of young people. And so that's where Tim and I really, really speak the same language. And so I'm just super excited to continue to be part of this program and this initiative that Tim is pushing forward. And related, my favorite college basketball player when I was a kid watching, college basketball on TV was Bobby Sura, who was a Florida State alum, had an incredible career at Florida State. And so I like the crimson and the gold. I'm pretty fond of it. It's nostalgic for me.
I want to talk about your new role because I think there's something we as sports professionals can learn from the new role that you have. But I want to go back to start with being an athletic director. At FSU Coach, of course, the primary student is a coach, but we also have sport management students in our programs. And the argument that I give to them when they're, well, why should I do a certificate in coaching when I want to be an athletic director or a team owner or something? My response is, well, you have the opportunity to understand what coaches go through and understand what they do so that communication level improves. When you're an athletic director, you understand a little bit about what they're doing and what they're talking about. From your perspective, you were a coach and then became an athletic director. How do you navigate those waters as an athletic director working with coaches where you've been there and done it, and you may not agree with necessarily what they're asking for or what they want? Because guess what? You're an AD, right? Coaches want stuff. We need help here. We need help there. We need money. We need you to resolve these problems. But as an AD, I'm asking you the hard questions, Chris, because I know you can handle it. But as an AD, you've been there, you've done it, and I know that what you see or the lens that you look through isn't necessarily the lens that I look through as an AD, and I disagree with you. How do you handle those situations?
Yeah. So for those sports management students that are really got their eyes on being an athletic administrator, I would really support Tim's sentiment there that they really need to have a very working knowledge of what coaches go through, what the coaching experience is like, because athletic administration is a very intimate leadership experience. You are typically going to have some of your most important interactions with your most important people. Your most important people are your coaches, particularly of those that are athletic directors in a school setting. It's about the kids, it's about the student athletes, but as an athletic director, your biggest return on investment will be how you lead and react and relate with your coaches. And I would even go so far as to say in a secondary setting, your varsity head coaches. And so to lead them intimately, and what I mean by intimate is there's extreme emotional highs, there's extreme emotional lows. The impact of young people is at stake. You will commiserate with each other, AD to coach, about very hard things, things that are heartbreaking, because you're working in an altruistic, effort that is very passionate. And so, stressing that intimacy even more is you're going to be expected to be at your best when you are at the bottom of the gas in your tank. And what I mean by that is so often the most important athletic director and coach interactions happen at 7 at night, 8 at night, in front of bleachers full of people, and so you've got to be at your best after you've already worked about 10 hours that day. And so as a result, there's just an intensity there, there's an intimacy there. And so athletic directors, the coaches need to trust the athletic administrator that they really do have their back. They really do empathize with what they're going through. And so a big part of that can be your formal training as a coach, as if you will, a coach practitioner, so that you can really express that empathy. You can really have a high level of trust with your varsity head coaches, because you're going to need it, because you're going to have some really, really intense interactions. Much of that intensity won't be anyone's fault. It's just the nature of working in sport. It's a very intense, passion driven thing with very clear winners, very clear losers, and a lot of influence at stake. And so, to those sport management students, yes, I agree with Dr. Baghurst. You need to become very well versed in coaching, and so I would encourage you to practice coaching by being involved in coaching, and I'd encourage you to get formal education in coaching, in the form of a certificate, a minor, or something like that. So now, for athletic directors that are leading those coaches, again, I want to reiterate that you are going to get your biggest bang for your leadership buck by pouring into those coaches. If you are pouring into those coaches by reminding them of the mission, the purpose, the 10,000-foot view, by intentionally feeding them information that can help them to either be more effective at their job, help them to be thought leaders. Thought leadership, I think, is something that's underestimated in both athletic administration and coaching leadership. If you can feed them that information that helps them to continue to be lifelong learners, if you can do these things on the front end, if you can defend them, right? Like if they know that you're going to take up their cause, you're going to advocate for them, you're going to defend them. If they know those things, and you're doing those things regularly, when it comes time to have a conversation where you need to align a coach, maybe realign a coach, conversation happens a whole lot easier because you've established yourself as a trusted advocate for who they are. And so they understand as a result, hey, Chris wouldn't be asking me to realign something here if he really didn't believe it. And he demonstrated that he himself is passionate about this. He himself is an expert in this. He's demonstrated that he'll advocate for me and defend me. And so realignment at that point, accountability, whatever term you use at that moment, is just goes a whole lot better. And then when you're at that moment where you've got to hold someone accountable, or you got to realign a coach, to make sure they're staying in mission, to make sure they're staying on board with the 10,000-foot view. At that moment, be very honest with them. Be clear, but be kind, right? Andy Stanley's got a great quote that to be clear is to be kind, and to be kind is to be clear. And so the kindest thing you can do for your coaches when they start to get off track a little bit is to be clear with them. And in the midst of being clear, be kind with them. There's no reason that a conversation like that needs to escalate into anything other than, hey, it's a little thing, right? So keep the little things little by dealing with them right as you see them, and you're doing all those other things I addressed. Those conversations really are almost family in nature, right? You think about, like, as parents, for those of you that are listening that are parents, you don't ever hesitate to address your child on something that needs to be realigned. You never hesitate, right? Like you're never worried about how they're going to respond. Like it's your child, it's your family, right? Those of you that are married or those of you that have siblings, right? Like we probably are too unfiltered with those people at times, right? But we never hesitate. We never hesitate because of all the other things that go into being a family. You don't really need to hesitate when it's time to have a conversation about like realigning, getting back on board with something. And so I really worked to try and have that type of relationship with the coaches that I was working with and supervising when I was an athletic director.
When you are an athletic director, you highlighted that wins are important. And there's no surprise. Yet, if we look at the grand scheme of things, most athletic programs are not hugely successful.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at, 50% are falling under in the bottom half. Somebody has to be down there. Somebody has to be in the top. If I follow you on social media, at least when you were an athletic director, I would see a lot of those successes on the court, on the field, etc. We don't necessarily see so much of the programs that are not doing well. Yet as an athletic director, you have equal responsibility to all programs, even when some programs might generate more revenue, more attention, more conversation. How do you allocate your time and resources so that each coach feels that you have their back when the community may not provide equal attention to all of those coaches and programs?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that I really enjoyed figuring out, particularly in my time at Kings. And so, a couple things I would say that kind of like maybe directly or indirectly feed into an answer. I was having a conversation with Dr. Jim Timmer. Jim Timmer is the director of athletics at Calvin University in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and they take their athletics very seriously. It's a faith-based organization, but it's a hard charge-in academic institution, but it also takes their athletics very, very seriously. And they've had a lot of success. And I was kind of posing a question to Dr. Timmer about, hey, he had just given a presentation on like kind of the philosophy of athletics at Calvin University, which was very altruistic. It was very faith-based. It was very student athlete centric. And so he didn't make a lot of comments in that presentation about the outcomes, about the winning. And so I went to him after the presentation, just in a one-on-one conversation. And I said, Jim, if you're doing all those things that you addressed, or if a coach is and they're not winning, like, what do you do? Right? Do you run out of town? How do you do? And he said, Chris, he said, if a coach is doing all those things and isn't winning, they probably aren't doing all those things. And that just, it just really, if we believe in the process, if we believe in the value of student athlete centric experiences that will push them to their fullest potential as a result, then we also, I think, have to see how the dominoes fall to maximum performance. And in most cases, the results will turn out the way we want them to turn out. And so that would be one of my if you will, evaluation frameworks or lenses that I would look at a program that is struggling. Like, really, is the coach from a technical standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, from an administrative standpoint, how they administrate their program? They really doing all those things well? Because if they, I think there's an argument that could be made. Well, if they were, the winning will take care of itself sooner rather than later. So that's something for both coaches to consider, and it's something for athletic administrators to consider as you're looking at those programs. Now, that being said, there are very much programs that they just garner lots of it. Football, right? Like football is its own beast inside of athletic departments, both high school and collegiate. It's its own animal, and it is a wonderful thing. And love the game of football. I love the electricity that it brings to a campus. The other thing I love about football is that Friday night football games in the high school setting, Saturday in the college setting, they are a great platform for a lot of other things too, right? And so you can make football like this silver bullet, if you will, for your not only your athletic department but for your whole school, because you can use that platform of that team and how many fans that football attracts. You can use it as a way to highlight and celebrate, congratulate, recognize all sorts of other entities on your campus. And so I was on a podcast with Chris Parker that runs a podcast, Parker Resources, out of Georgia. And Chris and I had this conversation, and I challenged athletic directors never have a normal Friday night home football game. Never let it be normal, right? Like, it should always be themed to something, celebrate something. And in that way, you've got this positive reciprocal effect where you're drawing more people in to watch your football team, but you're also validating all those other people that might be concerned. Well, football always gets the attention, so there's ways that you can create really good win-wins in those scenarios for a lot of different programs, where everyone, really everyone, is benefiting from it. So the other thing I would say too, as you're trying to balance out your time, as an athletic leader, to feed into coaches, regardless of the size of their platform, the size of the spotlight that they get, I would say you really need to think about, if I want my coaches to perform at the highest possible level, they need my attention. And so that question I opened up with earlier, that's example of, hey, if a coach is really doing all those things well, winning will probably take care of itself. Well, let's not forget, flip the coin. If a coach is really going to perform at a maximum level, they really do need to feel the validation, the attention, the support of their athletic administrator, their direct supervisor. So ADs, one of the questions you want to ask, hey, if a program's not winning, if a coach isn't having the success on the win-loss that I want them to have, am I a little bit to be blamed? Right? Am I just not present enough? Am I not pouring into them enough? Am I not helping them understand how to align their efforts with the greater vision of the student culture, the academic rigor, whatever it might be? And so athletic directors do need to take a long, hard look at owning the responsibility for a program that may not be performing at its highest possible level. And if you want it, right, like let's pick some of the Olympic sports that sometimes aren't in the limelight. If you want a dynamic tennis program, I'd ask you, okay, how much time are you pouring into your tennis coach? If you want a dynamic swim program, I was blessed at Kings. We just had an incredibly dynamic swim program that evolved while I was there. We had just some wonderful coaches. It was a unique time with some very talented, committed kids. By the way, swimmers, the amount of training that those swimmers put in is unbelievable. The workhorses, 366 days a year, the volume is incredible. But I took it really personal that those kids and that coach felt like what they were doing was important to our school. Well, if it's going to be important to our school, it starts with being important to me. And this is a leadership concept. If anyone's taking notes out there, as a leader, it's not about you, but it does start with you. And so that was something that I took very personally. It starts with me, and so if I want people to be passionate and excited about every single sport program in our athletic department, I've got to demonstrate my passion and excitement for it, mostly by my presence. And so that's how I would thread that needle and navigate those things that can be complex at times.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about this, celebrating in a football game, and recognizing people within leadership. There's a variety of different leadership models and how leaders can be effective. And so, the research out there is that anybody can be a leader. It doesn't have to be, well, you fit this mold, therefore you're going to be a great leader. Some leaders may not be, how do I say this, praiseworthy or give praise.
Yep.
It's kind of expected of you. This is your job. So you're supposed to do your job. And unless you hear from me, you're doing your job well. Whereas others are very much cheerleaders and stand on the sidelines and great job, keep going. I love what you do. When we look at coaching and we talk about feedback to athletes, we definitely say that we need to give feedback to athletes.
Yep.
But some leaders don't give much feedback to their employees, in this case, coaches. Where do you fit on there in terms of praising and encouraging your coaches versus sitting back and allowing them to do their job and kind of just expecting that this is what they're doing. This is what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. So I'm gonna speak in really strong terms on this. That's kind of how I'm like, I tell people never use never, and then I always use never, right? Like, and so absolutes are dangerous things. And sometimes I come across far stronger than I intend to be. And so for everyone out there that's listening, I want to encourage you to synthesize what I'm saying, process it according to your situation, your dynamics. But I would say, so for me, naturally, Patrick Lencioni has a skills assessment tool called the Working Genius. He just released it maybe 2 or 3 years ago based upon his 30 plus years of organizational leadership research. And in Working Genius, there's 6 different types of geniuses. Everyone has two working geniuses. They have 2 working competencies, and then they have 2 working frustrations. Working genius is where not only are you probably uniquely wired for that, but you get the most life and energy out of doing it. Your working competencies would be things that you're totally sufficient at. It's fine for you to do it. You probably just don't want to make an entire day out of it because it'll exhaust you. It's not that all engaging to you. Working frustrations are things, quite honestly, you stink at, you're not wired for, and you should try and avoid them as much as you can because they're just going to suck the life out of you. So for me, my working genius would be galvanizer and enabler. I love to bring people together and get them excited. I also love to send them out after they've been excited to go do whatever it is that they're passionate about and what brought them into the room in the first place. And so I'm kind of naturally wired this way to the answer to this question. And so I would say, though, communication from a leader, you're either over communicating or you're under communicating. There is no in between. And in today's fast-paced society, one of the most important things a leader can do is communicate. And communicate means a whole wide variety of things. You know, for some people, you're probably thinking email. For some people, you might be talking meeting agendas. For some people, you might be talking like annual or semi-annual evaluations. I would say communication is all of that, with particular modes of it geared towards how you are wired as a leader. Right. And so for me as a galvanizer enabler, celebration of my people and their achievements and accomplishments comes very easily. And so for some people, very detailed meeting agendas with very clear action items to be followed up on, right? Like those are all forms of communication. I would say you've got to do just about almost every form of them, but I would say to everyone listening, you as a leader, make sure you spend time communicating in the way that you are wired to communicate. And you will either over communicate or you will under communicate. And I would encourage everyone to lean towards over communicate and never shy and never be in the category of under communicate. And so that's the first thing I would share with people. We have to communicate, but I would encourage you to lean towards communicating the way in which you're wired. And so for me, it's going to be fist bumps, high fives, back slaps. It's going to be social media shout outs. It'll be all that kind of stuff. For other people, it might not be that animated and that extroverted. But there is ways in which you are wired to communicate, leader, and I would encourage you to over communicate in those particular ways. The second thing I would say is Scott Eblin's got a book called The Next Level, and it's about really moving up levels in leadership. And one of the quotes, it's a really good book, but the only thing I remember from that book that I've remembered and used often is that we live in a day and age where the work no longer speaks for itself. And so as a result, leaders have to become expert cheerleaders. You've got to figure out how to talk for the work on behalf of the people that are doing the work, right? Like this is not about taking credit for anyone's work. In fact, it's the total opposite. It's about giving credit where credit is due. But because we are such a noisy society, we are such a high information society, things get drowned out. We're also a specialized society. And so athletic directors, this is important to hear. You need to treat your coaching staffs as if they are experts, because in many cases, they will be experts. So I'll give you a really, really easy example. So my head baseball coach at the Kings Academy was Jared Saltalamacchia. Jared's starting catcher with the Red Sox when they won the World Series in 2013. Jared Saltalamacchia does not need me looking over his shoulder at his baseball practice plan, right? Like that's not what Jared is, an expert in the field. What Jared needed from me was to make sure that I was constantly communicating mission so he could align his expertise to our mission. And I needed to be doing everything I could to move obstacles out of his way so he could do what he was passionate about. And so as a result of the complexities and nuances of our society, the work doesn't speak for itself. So leaders have to be expert cheerleaders. Now, I would encourage you to become a cheerleader in the way in which you're wired. Don't do things that aren't natural to you, because people pick up on that as inauthentic. But celebrate your people. Maybe it's just a quiet, you pass through the office and you hand them, a gift card, or, you give them a fist bump, and it's just a quiet thing, right? Like, you're just not out there. You're not a showman or something like that. Celebrate, just do it in a way that you're uniquely wired, because that will come across to your people as authentic. And then the other thing I would say is to make sure that you are treating your people like experts. Because we live in a day and age in which the information hierarchy is flattened. And so everyone can really become an expert in something. And coaches, being as passionate as they are, likely have some level of expertise in what they're doing for you. And so make sure that you are treating them as such, and simply, in many times, aligning them simply to mission, celebrating them, and getting obstacles out of their way.
Your new role, and by the way, if you're one of the questions was the Next Level book. Who's it written by?
Scott Eblin, Eblin. Definitely worth your time.
Thanks, Belford, for that question. If you do have a question for Chris and want to get a question to him, just put it in the chat box. We'll get it through to him. You've moved on, and now you're in institutional advancement. And if I'm to guess at that, it's involving fundraising. Am I right?
So I supervise advancement, which would be the collection of resource for the institution. I supervise admissions, and then I supervise marketing, and I supervise communications for our school here, which is about almost 1,600 kids across 4 campuses. And so it's got some fun complexities to it.
Well, I'm particularly interested in the fundraising side, because a lot of coaches have minimal budgets. A lot of coaches are responsible for raising their own money for their own programs. Can't rely on a massive donor or funding coming from the athletic director. Do you have any just quick pieces of advice that would help coaches be more successful in looking for and then acquiring funding for their programs?
Yeah. So probably 2 right off the top of my head would be, what service can you and your group provide to a community, and a service that would be very unique to your community.
Can you give an example of what you mean by that?
I'm sorry, say again, Tim.
Can you give an example of what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so a service would be a car wash, right? But that is, in my opinion, that is too vanilla. That's
Everybody does car washes.
Yeah, you want to find a service that's unique to your community. And so I'll give you, so like mums, right? Like these big floral decorations are a huge deal around homecoming time here at high schools in Texas. Okay, what is it about that my group could provide a service that people would be willing to pay for? And get the kids involved, because when the kids involved, people will pay far more for the service than if it's just you and the coaching staff, right? Because now you're talking tips, and you're talking suggested donation, and so I would encourage people to provide a service that is very specific to their community. I'll give you an example coming from years and years ago. I was a very young athletic director and a boys basketball coach at a tiny little private school right outside Washington, D.C. We had a family there that was just known in our community as the husband was just known as a master barbecue chef. It was just like a side thing he did. It wasn't a profession. It wasn't a career. He didn't make a dime off it. But on our behalf, the athletic department's behalf, he would run these massive turkey sales, smoked turkeys around Thanksgiving. Let me tell you something. It was holy cow. It was so unique to our community, and people just were beating each other up to get Bob Brooks turkeys, and so I would have all the kids lead under Bob's supervision, do all the prep, right? We would literally smoke turkeys straight through the night, right? So you'd have to go 24 hours without sleep, but it was just a unique service, a unique opportunity to really meet the need and the desire of our community in a unique way. And so I'd encourage coaches to get creative about what service can they provide that is unique to their community. And then the other thing I would encourage coaches to think about is you have expertise and you have content that you could create, that you could share, that people are willing to pay for. That's the day and age we live in. And so it's not too crazy to think about, coaches creating content that people would be willing to pay money for, student interviews, excerpts from practice, your favorite sets, like it wouldn't take too long to build a social media footprint that you could then turn around and share as content for pay. An email distribution list that goes along with a simple blog site produced by a blogger or WordPress. And I mean, you charge moderate prices for it because you're not pretending you're Phil Jackson or anything like that. But, if you're a basketball coach, you're not presenting like you're Nick Saban if you're a football coach. It's amazing, though. I really think it's a day and age in the coaching world where people are just scrounging the internet for any idea they can to help their teams be successful. And so as a result, to pay $5 for a PDF of your favorite plays, like that's not beyond reason. And so those are little things you could do to create streams of revenue that would help you to do what you want to do for your kids.
You've been in leadership a long time. You've been a leader of a variety of different athletes, then coaches, now staff and administration in a school. Just in closing, could you offer some advice, maybe 2 or 3 points that would benefit anybody who's looking to either grow as a leader or become a leader from what you've learned along the way, what you've read and experienced?
Yeah, yeah. So I've got a framework. So I've lived here in Houston, Texas for about 3 months now. And so I'm still very new. The school year is not quite 2 months old here. And so very, very, very new. And so I've made the transition a couple times to new places. And so I use a framework that helps me kind of connect and lead as effectively as possible, as fast as possible. The framework is CASA, CASA. So like the Spanish word for home. And that kind of bleeds into a greater idea for everyone. And I'll give you what CASA stands for in just a second. It's an acronym. The idea is in order to influence them, meaning the people you're leading, and in order to influence them, they have to believe that you are one of them. I think that's one of the most effective concepts in leadership, and it stresses the importance of relationship. It stresses the importance of being in it for the benefit of the group, not for the benefit of yourself. So in order to influence them, you have to become one of them. And so as a result, you need to make it home. You got to figure out how to make it home. And so like little things, if you're changing state, and this is like really little stuff, if you're changing state right now, I'd encourage you get your license plate switched over to the new state as fast as possible so that people really think, hey, the guy must be serious, just moved here. He's already got his Texas tags, and so like little things like that speak volume to people beginning to trust you. I'd encourage you to do tons of drop bys with people. And well, what are you here for? Just dropping by. What's going on? And I'm curious about what you do every day. What are you frustrated with? What do you love about what you do? Right. And you have to spend a good amount of time, probably far more time than most leaders would be comfortable with, because leaders probably got to where they are because they want to move fast. And so you got to spend a lot of time convincing them you're one of them. And they'll sniff you out if you're a fake. If you're doing it for selfish reasons or manipulative reasons, they'll sniff you out, right? So you better truly be there for them, or they're going to figure that out real fast too. And so here's what CASA means. If you're trying to be there for them, if you're trying to influence them by becoming one of them, by making your new place a home, and you are always in a process of making it home, right? Like it gets a little easier, relationships get intact, but 10 years in, you should still be trying to make it home and facilitate trust between your people. So here's what CASA means. Here's a framework I'm directly using right now, and I've used it previously in my career. The C is connect. And I just kind of talked about that. You want to connect, authentically connect with as many people as you can connect with. The A is ask. You want to ask a million questions. Just ask every question you can think of, and people will begin to figure out that you're really authentically curious about what they do and who they are and what their organization's about and what are your traditions, what's the culture. Like, ask every question. Don't shy away from any question. Ask where the broom closet is, right? Like ask every question. That curiosity over time begins to send a clear message that you're there for them. So connect. The first A is ask. The S is serve. I really think that servant leadership should be a part of everyone's leadership style. Dr. Robert Greenleaf, if you want to be contemporary, made this concept, this framework popular in the 70s. If you want to get really historical, Jesus Christ made it popular in the New Testament 2,000 years ago. And so servant leadership and efforts to really authentically take care of others never return void. That's never a bad use of your time. So connect, ask, serve, and then the last A is aim. And what I mean by that is you need to continue to set professional goals that will help you keep growing. You need to continue lifelong leadership. You need to aim and keep pursuing targets that will help you grow. This is so badly underestimated, in my opinion, but the harder you work to really learn and grow, the more effective you become as a leader. And so many leaders get stuck in a spot of like, I don't have time to lead myself. I don't have time to learn. I'm so busy. Well, I would say that it's amazing how effective your hours that are left to lead are when you are really working hard to grow yourself. You find out you don't need quite as many hours as you thought you needed, because you're becoming far more effective because you're continuing to aim towards a personal professional target. So example for me, when I made the commitment that me and my family are going to move to Houston, Texas, I knew I had to get the culture in Texas is unique. Texans are proud people. They love their state. And I knew I've got to understand that, right? Like I'm a Northeastern dude. And so like, I got to understand that pride and that they take in their state. And so I've read 2 books that have to do with the historical context, one of Houston and then one of don't call it the state of Texas. I learned that we call it the Republic of Texas. And so, and so as a result, and the people of Texas have been awesome. They've been great, but I've been aiming, like part of my professional growth is I've got to officially and tangibly learn about this new place that I'm at. And so that's how you turn it into CASA. That's how you turn it into home. You connect, you ask, you serve, and you aim. And so that would be my advice to anyone at any phase of their leadership, no matter how long they've been around. It's a very workable framework, but particularly if you're somewhat new to the place.
I like it, Chris, and I wrote it down as well. So when I write things down, they have value because they're going to many
Right. That's right. There's great research on that too.
If somebody does have a question for you, maybe watching on YouTube or somewhere later on, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I love Twitter. There's some things really wrong with Twitter, but I love Twitter for all the good reasons. And so I love to connect with people out there. It would be at Dr_Chris Hobbs. So at Dr_Chris Hobbs. We can connect out there. Love to keep the conversation go. Love to be connected to other people that are passionate about leadership, about leading themselves, about coaching, about athletic administration, organizational leadership. All those things are a lot of fun to connect with people and talk about.
And also, as an FYI, you can also email him at coachchrishobbs@gmail.com. Well, Chris, as always, thanks so much for taking the time to share a little bit of your expertise and experience. And I do hope people reach out and do connect with you, because as you alluded to, this is a network. This is an opportunity where we can all grow from each other.
Yep, absolutely. Tim, keep the great work. For everyone listening. What Dr. Baghurst and his group are doing, really valuable. Connect with them, earn a certificate, get a master's degree. You will really, really understand why, as you're going through, why it can be so valuable. And so, Tim, keep up the great work there in Tallahassee.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris. And thank you all for watching. Do appreciate your support. Of course, we're here almost each and every week with new guests. So until next time, thanks so much for watching.